Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Hype Man Reviews where hype comes to die. I'm Skurwriter and today we're going to talk about Dispatch. Dispatch is one of those games that I prefer to play on my own rhythm. I was tackling Expedition 33 after all, and I probably will be in the next game review. But sadly, YouTube and Facebook do as those do, and they plastered all sorts of videos with spoilerific descriptions. So I had to shift priorities. Still, I was there when Telltale Games appeared with the bombastic adaptation of Bone. I was there when they reached their zenith with Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us. I was also there when people started to realize how shitty their railroading was. But the story itself was still good. And I was there in their final downfall when their stories became bad. And now, Dispatch comes to fill the niche of Western sort of interactable novels with minigames. How did it fare? So, what is it about? Made by Ad Hoc Studios, which is composed by members of the now defunct aforementioned Telltale Games, Dispatch is okay, I know that it's listed as action and strategy in Steam, but this is a visual novel. The heavy focus is in the story is guided more or less through your decisions and gameplay aspects are minimal. It's a Western visual novel and nobody can convince me otherwise. Anyway, it's a visual novel where the player gets in the shoes of Robert Robinson III, the current Mecha Man, and played by Aaron Paul. No really. Or he was Mecha Man until a trap laid by the mysterious villain Shroud destroyed his armor. Hero life seemed to be over for him until Blonde Blazer, played by Erin Yvette, a corporate sponsored superhero, shows up with a proposition. Cook meth, become a dispatcher for the SDN, the Superhero Dispatch Network, help new heroes with his knowledge and experience, and his suit will be rebuilt. Now he has to be the dispatcher for the Z-Team, composed by ex-supervillains who are trying to turn a new leaf. And it won't be easy. At all. Visuals. This is one of those cases where the visuals herald the rest of the work. Dispatch has a rather peculiar visual style, which I can't exactly pin. I know it's derived from anime due to its focus on large eyes and mouth styles. The closest comparison in by a long shot is Studio Mir. But since the story doesn't suck balls here, I doubt it. But first things first, the color palette of this game was well chosen. It focuses most on blue and yellow with lighter tones, running away from the thicker palette seen in Marvel or the blackness of the DC. The color schemes also have a thematic tie with characterization, but I will delve more into it with the character designs. Scenario-wise, it's a rather simple urbane superhero fantasy. There won't be any ludicrously complex places to visit. The main focus is the office of the SDN, but you see exciting places such as bars, warehouses, bars, docks, bars, and shoddy apartments. And, well, you know the drill. What I found a bit bizarre is that the technology is a bit mixed. The game is set in 2023 with cell phones and some electric cars, but there are pieces of technology such as the computer used by the dispatchers that would be more fitting to a retropunk game, and no exposition is given as to why this was chosen. The color palette and overall design serves to give the viewer the impression that this work is detached from the more known franchises around, and this is only reinforced by the style of the characters. They are often simple with few pieces, at most 2 or 3 pieces per character, so the viewer's attention is drawn to the visual quirks, such as Mecha Man's ear hole, or Blaze's face mask and blonde hair, and the red gem rested against her chest, surrounded by yellow contrasting with blue. It's quite efficient. The most elaborated designs come from the Z-Teams themselves and the villains, since the Z-Teams were villains, with mechanical augmentations, horns, pieces that wiggle around and so on. This can be a call for simplicity versus complexity, especially when you take in the color schemes on the table. Only 2 heroes have major red pieces, which are Phenomenon and Malevolent. Everyone else is yellow and or blue. Even Flambe, whose powers are derived from fire, is mostly yellow, all while the vast majority of the villains are in darker shades of red with 1 or 2 lime greens. The sole exception for this is Invisigal, who is purple, which is the color that you get mixing red and blue, showing how she is between being a villain and a hero. And another thing that I have to point out is that by Alan Moore's beard, the references are out of control. No one in the sinful earth can convince me that Malevola wasn't inspired by Color Arch from Baldur's Gate 3 and Phenomenon Man is Harry Dubois. Look, he has the same depressed expression. He has that. Several characters from Main 1 to Blink and You Miss People that appear in the backgrounds are references to someone in the superhero genre all around, from east to west. Attention to detail is good here, from where the characters are looking at and how, expressive models, and since the visual aspect is the atlas of this game, I can say that it fares quite well. The animation itself is smooth, which synergizes well with the simple design of the characters. These are experienced developers in visual novels, so expect interesting but static angles focused on the conversation, which, well, duh. All sorts of angles are used in order to not make things stale, such as first person, over-the-shoulder cameras, above cameras, etc. There aren't many pans or dynamic cameras, and during combat, yes there is combat, I'd say that it does a medium job. It's nothing thrilling, but nothing bad either. The highlight of the combat is a scene where a bar fight switches the point of view between past and present as it happens. I'm willing to be more lenient with the fight scenes because they were made to be tied with QuickTime event inputs, and, more than that, QuickTime input events for a game that is not focused on such, so they are slower than the norm, but with a good reason. At worst, said combat scenes felt a bit longer than they should be, akin to the James Gunn Superman, when a super is punched by a giant mech, goes through a wall, and just walks out as if unscathed, your engagement immediately tanks due to how little weight everything has. But the worst, visually, is part of the program itself. It's nothing serious, but at least to me, whenever there was a transition between scenes, moments where decisions are meant to happen or worse safe spots, there was some visual stuttering. It's nothing serious, but those with more sensitive eyes can be annoyed by it. Honestly, it's nice to see something fresh in the superhero genre for once, and with a nice visual style. Gameplay. Well, if this is your first visual novel experience, do not fret, it will be quite simple. Basically, you watch things going on, there will be more often than not 3 choices to what your protagonist can say or do, and that's it. You watch the results of your actions unfold, and then at the end of the episode, you see how many people chose the same or went against it. It's overall solid. What kind of answer you see is what you get, so nothing like LA Noire where you choose press the issue and Cole will get off his hinges. Sometimes, mostly at the beginning and the end, there will be QuickTime event sections, although their influence on the plot isn't as solid, almost irrelevant in comparison with the dialogue choices. More important to say is that this game is short. You can complete it in 1 or 2 days, and this is normal. But sadly, there is a gigantic problem with this part of the visual novel gameplay. You can't skip anything. This may sound silly, but in any sort of visual novel worth its salt, the option to skip dialogues or cutscenes is downright vital since this sort of genre thrives in replayability. You play it again to see what would happen if you chose differently. Being unable to skip the material you already know instantly makes replaying said game a chore. Do you really want to go through 2 cutscenes, a long dialogue and a slow pause just to see what would happen if your detective got a cup of coffee instead of tea? Another problem is the inability to save in multiple slots. If you finish chapter 5 but you want to check what happened if you chose something else in chapter 2, you lose all the progress. Besides the dialogues, the brunt of the game is, obviously, the dispatch. There is the map where you see the assignments popping up. Say the assignments will require a specific combination of stats to be won, hinted by the description of what the person wants. Depending on the assignment, you dispatch from 1 to 4 heroes, and their combined statuses are compared with the requirements of the task at hand, and you get a percentage of losing or winning. Losing may hurt the heroes involved, and if they are already hurt, they are taken after the shift. Winning grants them and you some XP. If a hero levels up, you may assign 1 point to the stats, and you can discover hero powers by using said heroes in different ways. Sometimes one gets stronger when assigned to the second place stat in a dispatch, other times their powers are activated when they get hurt. And lastly, through the series, there will be chances to upgrade them by teaching them to fly or use their powers in an inventive way. Heroes take time to reach and dispatch, do set dispatch, return to take a break before being able to be placed on a field again, so you have to take care of who do you send and where. It may look simple at first, but the game will frequently throw curveballs at you. Some assignments will do a sudden swerve and demands another status. Sometimes your heroes may sabotage each other. Assignments rise in complexity and new mechanics are thrown every episode. Some of these will be simple and even interesting to keep the player on their toes, not getting too used how things are running. Others will be more annoying. Sometimes sending the right hero to the right dispatch will unlock a special option, but sadly, unless the hero in question asks you to go into such assignment, there is no way to predict who is better where. It's not that big of a problem, it's actually one point that pushes for replayability, to see what happens if you send someone the charisma to deal with a violent altercation, or send a horrifying golem to grab a cat from a tree. And of course, you bump on the fact that you have to go through a whole unskippable episode to tweak with those options. The worst thing with the dispatch is that sometimes you'll be sidewinded by a new mechanic that will completely screw with your hero setup. For example, from a specific day you'll find assignments where having too much of a stat like combat insta fails the assignment, and it seriously messed up my loadout because the vast majority of my heroes had a medium to high combat and there was no way to redistribute points. Aside from 1 or 2 resets because I was failing too much in a row, being able to pull off a nice combo and keep things under control is quite satisfying. The last episode does ramp the difficulty though. Interestingly, the first mechanic introduced by the game isn't the dispatching, but the hacking. It takes shape of a simple game where you have to roll a shape through a grid to solve some puzzles and memorize patterns, which made me instantly scream for liberty for some reason. The game itself isn't bad and can be quite entertaining, with some minor hiccups here like threats coming from below the camera and you won't see it until it's too late, and the annoying hot code game where the hints given aren't overly useful. I do think that it was used well, as a nice season to spice things up and don't let things get overly repetitive. The user interface is also simple and straightforward. You can check the powers of your heroes, at least the powers that you discovered, their past and more, and the game does tell you how long it has been since the last save. Overall, it has its bumps, but it's simple, straightforward and fun. Writing. Writing-wise, Dispatch was just as interesting as it was hard to tackle because a lot here relies on personal taste. And I don't know if this was on purpose, engineered or out of desperation. You can never tell with these games. Okay, fine. But I felt that the writing was done on a scattershot piecemeal affair. This is a superhero drama, office comedy, underdog tale, and it uses several tropes and points from each one of these genres, always dancing on the edge, but never going too far. For example, comedy-wise, I myself hate awkward humor, where the people just standing around letting the awkward silence fester and the deal with assholes trope. But here, not only it doesn't go too far to the point of making the ZT completely unlikable or making me feel like I'm watching The Office, but it does mix things well enough that I genuinely laugh at some of the shenanigans. Again, it depends on personal taste. There are also the right gratuitous nudity and profanity here. I mean, seriously, I didn't need to see the dick of an acid guy right in the first episode, but there isn't much else besides that. Profanity is also mostly well toned. You see right from the get-go who are the acid spitters, and when a polite character curses, this means that things got serious. There are also some gory fights mixed with the superhero punching through walls action scenes. There is a lot of references and self-depreciating humor, but nothing that turns edgy or sarcastic. It's insanely hard to balance all of this, so kudos for the writers! And in the middle of this balancing, the overall tone is kept light, since the majority of the game are simple conversations between equally balanced characters. Speaking of, characterization is quite solid. Here you can see all sorts of characters seen in superhero works, from the black and white evil and good to the more muddled grey, from the more realistic to the ludicrous, the more serious to silly, and they all have flaws and perks that make them credible. For example, Mecha Man is absurdly jaded and experienced, has seen all, did all, and nobody needs to go through great lengths describing his feats in exposition dumps. His dialogue and tone of voice, the way where he always keeps his cool regardless of the situation, is clear enough to show it. And I love a good show don't tell. Robert is a good lead. A mix of Iron Man and Spider-Man with some dashes of Batman. I feel that he could be less of a shaggy dog, but superhero tropes be like that. Nonetheless, he balances well the focus on keeping everyone's heads up and facing his own inner demons. His drama isn't overblown, and the writing shows that he is skilled with more than just piloting and hacking. He is a good leader and is capable of adjusting ad hoc. Because ad hoc means for the public. Okay, I'll stop. Some of his speeches are nice, and while he does get a bit too passive and a bit too reliant on others, for example, I'd like to have seen him more involved in rebuilding his own mecha, he still proves why he's the leader again and again. And his isn't the only deep characterization. Blonde Blazer is one of the most efficient and strong heroes around, but she's also immensely insecure due to how she stutters whenever talking with people outside of a professional angle, but immediately flips to a dead serious persona when things go down. Or Invisigal, who is also insecure, but from a different angle. She struggles to be accepted as a hero, but is filled with self-loathing and destructive tendencies. After all, she's asthmatic and smokes. The scenario itself is a bizarre mix between Marvel and DC. While the overall tone is light, so no dead boys here thankfully, the major public can be a bunch of ungrateful bastards sinking out blood, while at the same time treating superheroes as idols and also like celebrities. It thus carves its niche, but again, it's a niche. What I liked most about this game's story was its honesty. At no point in all its episodes it tried to be overly subversive, nor separated sad scenes with annoying Marvel-esque humor, or sabotaged serious moments with quips. Sometimes it tries to be self-referential or poke fun at its own tropes, but again, it dances on the edge. The most important thing is that it allows the more serious scenes to breathe and the characters to be enjoyed as they are, so your choices are clearer. This is where the visual novels, especially the subgenre of the Telltale games, live or die. The balance between railroading and letting the player have agency. Give your players too much freedom and suddenly you have to deal with thousands of combinations of possible outcomes. Don't give your players freedom enough and people lose interest in playing. All I can say is that this patch did a good job. Its main focus is obviously that Robertson can change his immediate surroundings, himself included. He has no hand in the bigger schemes of things and the stakes don't go beyond a certain point. He is solid enough that you know who he is, but flexible enough that you can guide him through a specific path. How should he deal with his armor being destroyed? Does he still keep being a good person, a heroic figure, or does he get more jaded, anti-hero? There are plenty of opportunities, including flavored dialogue, to set such. Hell, the folks at Ad Hoc were so good with this sort of choice that they paved a nice ground for experimentation. Try something that goes off rails, you may be surprised. There is a villain, but he mostly shows up during the start and the end of the saga, so said villain and his plans are less of a focus, unlike Roberts and the Z-teams. There is, of course, the usual Telltale quirks and problems. For example, some hard choices come from nowhere, twists that could be better, or the old choice that looks as if it was impactful but it has no bearing on that plot. The worst things that I could say about the plot and writing without dabbling into spoilers is, as usual for a Telltale game, the last two chapters feel immensely rushed and with a really messy writing absolutely chock full of holes. The ending is overall nice and your choices do have some impact, but the chapters themselves ended in a sad, the more you look at it the worse it gets situation. Ad Hoc could have benefited a lot from 2 more chapters to properly flesh out the characters and the plot. And sadly, there is an overfixation on Invisigal. I don't hate her, I think that the idea between a woman's inner struggle being depicted as purple in a world of red and blue is interesting, but it's absurdly obvious though what happens and how it happens that she is the favorite of the writing team. Luckily, this favoritism doesn't derail the narrative and she doesn't poison the other characters in order to look better, so she doesn't get even remotely close to being the dreaded Mary Sue. But the constant focus on her stole the spotlight of other characters that needed more development, including Robert himself. In the end, the story and characters are a step up from the usual Telltale fare, Ad Hoc showing their experience and skill, but sadly there is also a lot of baggage and old vices that they need to get rid of. Soundtrack. The music is actually a bit weird for me. It's a mix of synth as if this was a period piece of the 80s, but the tech and everyone just behaves as if it was the modern era, and the Less Is Said songs are mostly okay. It's not bad, but nothing that I'd say it's good either. Middle of the road. Now, voice acting wise, I prize myself in having a pretty good ear, able to pinpoint I've heard this guy before several times and with accuracy. And I couldn't for the love of God recognize Aaron Paul till I actually saw his name on the credits. I heard him in Breaking Bad, I heard him in Final Fantasy, and I wish I didn't, less because of him and more because that movie is awful, and I couldn't recognize him.
Oh, wait. You are sunglasses indoors at night guy. Your superpower is that you're able to let everyone know in the room that you're a douchebag, because you should literally never do that unless you're at the final table of the World Series of Poker, but even then, if you win, you're still a fucking loser.
Shit. That is... damn.
You good?
That's how good he was in playing a jaded man at the edge of depression in an unknown future. Robert rarely raises his voice above a certain level, showing his absolute control over his emotions, but he isn't made of iron. He constantly feels the weight of his legacy. The casting and directing were really good. On the front you have seasoned voice actors, even if Aaron Paul and Jeffrey White are somewhat new to video games, and the less experienced voice actors, guests and such stay on the back burner with their time to shine. So if the brunt of their emotional impact comes from the voice acting, I'd say they did their jobs very well. I don't know why though, but Blonde Blazer voice makes my adrenaline spike as if I was about to get into a scrap.
What is it?
I'm not quite drunk enough to share my origin story just yet, but remind me to tell you someday.
Raven, I've identified an approaching enemy. I'll synchronize with your brainwaves and maintain contact to support you.
Final thoughts. Yeah, this is a no-brainer. This is a short game that knew what it wanted, to be a successor to the Telltale games, and in all things considered, it did its role well, with some bumps on the road. It's nice to see another superhero series that tries to be its own thing without going for sarcasm and deconstruction. It's bright, it balances well several plates, it does have serious bumps on the road that need to be ironed out in the next project, more in style of development and story, but nonetheless it is a solid inheritor of the Telltale mantle. Spoilers. So, the main gist of the game is that Robert is a pilot and his mecha needs a specific power source, the Astral Pulse. The game starts with the villain, Shroud, busting Robert's armor in an attempt to seize it because his whole motivation is finding said Astral Pulse, more or less the Lord of the Rings. Robert is approached by Blonde Blaze, who offers him a job as the dispatch. They have a nice conversation, although she feels a bit unsure of which proper words to use, making things a bit ambiguous, which may lead to Robert kissing her or not. The Z-Team is introduced, they are the usual bunch of bastards, and so on. The first big choice is presented right at the second chapter, with the game basically showing that you have to choose between Blonde Blaze, who is a heroine that helps Robert get out of his slump, is supportive all the way, tells him that he's a true hero while she's just a corporal cape, and the other option is Invisible, an emotionally unstable bitch, chain smoker with asthma, who stalks Robert in the bathroom and dresser, keeps calling him a fraud because he has no powers, and when he calls her out on her shitty behavior, she punches him. Take a guess which one I chose. Now, the first point of contention is the third chapter. Robert is told by Blazer that the person with the worst score of the dispatch team would be eliminated, and Invisible is last. I knew she was going to be saved because she's a main character, but the game suddenly switched gears and make Robert sack either Coop or Sonar in a dick move way. I know that this was one of those big choices that would influence the rest of the game. My issue isn't this being here, but how it was done. Gameplay wise, there is no option to keep both no matter how good you play with them or neither of them. And making things worse, this is the episode where permanent power-ups are given and those are insanely rare and useful. Meaning, I would have sacked Sonar, but I had just taught him how to fly, so I choose Coop. Writing wise, the more I think about this specific situation, the worse it gets because those are villains who are trying to turn a leaf around, and they suck as heroes, sure. This is a corporate North American and a comic book game, yes, but even then, the idea of kicking out a monstrous man-bat or a highly trained unstable assassin, both who willingly trying to turn better, is insanely stupid. It's dispassionate, dry, disproportional, and the only reasoning behind it is we need that to make do. Except that Blonde Blazer showed that she listens to Robert's input and probably will have backed it off if he asked such. So the writing makes it looks like either Blonde Blazer or Robert was downright callous and short-sighted. It could have been dealt with in a better way, like both Sonar and Coupe seriously fucking up at the same time, or trying to sabotage each other in a cutscene, or so on. Could have pointed out how corporate America is a callous place, or Blaze would have pointed out each one's flaws to make the player ponder how to proceed. But it's during chapter 3 that I noticed how much the creator's pet Invisigal was. When Blonde Blazer said,
Look, I know I'm not supposed to play favorites here, but even if she was on the bottom, I'm not sure I'd have let you cut her.
She ignores that Invisigal punched Robert, doesn't say why she'd save Invisigal Bacon, nor what would happen if Invisigal was still at the bottom. Would she go over her own word and mandate to fire either Coop or Sonar? I don't know. I just sighed and realized that I would have to be a good person to Invisigal to get her good graces, so to get the good ending, no matter of how many fuck-ups she did, and she fucks up a lot. It is shown that she's trying her best, yes, but she repeatedly acts like a spoiled brat that can do anything she wants because she's invisible, keep fucking up because she won't listen to anyone else, expects everyone to go along with her schemes no matter what, and if you don't support her all the way even when any sane person would have told her to fuck off, no seriously, she has the gall of turning into a villain thinking that it was fate or whatever. The saving grace is that if you try to save her, Robert actually acts as someone who wants everyone to be better instead of just trying to play favorites. And you can be a good person to her regardless of going for the Blonde Blaze romance. In fact, something that I loved about this love triangle is how honest everything is. What you see, both with Blonde Blazer or Invisigal, is what you get. Both their personalities are clear from the get-go. Blonde Blazer respects Robert and wants to help him, while she has some personal issues and her own pressure about her image. And Invisigal is the broken bird that needs help. No secret twists of character, no Blonde Blaze being secretly a capitalist bitch or Invisigal being misunderstood. And there is no extra drama either. If you choose one, the other will just quietly accept. At best, there is the reveal that Invisigal used to work for the main villain and was part of the effort to sabotage his suit. But this reveal doesn't change anything about the fact that she's a messed up woman full of regrets that is trying to do good. Like I said before, Invisigal's presence doesn't poison other characters to make her look better, but she still hogs an insane amount of time, which sadly wasted a ton of potential with Blonde Blaze. In comparison with Invisigal, she barely shows up and has very few opportunities of interaction with Robert. The sad waste of a huge potential comes from the fact that pretty much like Robert, Blonde Blaze actually has no powers. Her medallion empowers her, and without it, she is just a normal person. And because of that, she has a ton of self-image issues, especially with her fame. She isn't even blonde. Imagine all the conversations they could have, like Blaze fearing she may end up like Robert, or having Robert as an idol because he never hid he was a man inside a mecha. He could be the one to reassure her that even if they don't have powers, they could be heroes. Anyway, moving on. If until episode 6 Ad Hoc was able to keep an amazing balance, from the middle of episode 7 to 8 it trips and breaks its nose. It's not life-threatening, but it's ugly. Because of Invisigal fucking up, one of Robert's friends is hospitalized, and how he goes to cope with it? By going to a villain bar alone to mope. power walking through the night in Detroit to get over my breakup would be safer. And it's all just so Shroud can capture him. Wait, no. It's also Shroud can tell him that Invisigal stole the MacGuffin from both of them for some reason that is barely said. Robert is saved and we go through the last chapter where, oh gods, Shroud forces suddenly multiply to a level he can basically put the entire city under siege, and with the sole purpose of going to the SDN headquarters to find Robert and get the Thingamajig back. There were so many ways this could have been done in a simpler, better... Anyway, he reveals that the Invisigal is still working for him, which is such an idiotic, unnecessary plot twist that the whole fandom is ignoring it, and I won't even touch it that with a 10-foot pole. And he also reveals that he created the MacGuffin, not Robert's father, which just begs the question, why the fuck didn't he just make his own version later? Shroud is ununderstandable as both as villain and character, but annoying. He's basically a Dr. Doom hyper-arrogant man that was spurned and wants vengeance. His main power is that he has a computer for a brain and thus can predict nearly everything. This can be used as a crutch by the writers to explain his immense success, but his powers vary wildly during the gameplay and sadly the writers use it to justify his nigh invincibility, even when it's proven that he can't predict everything and is facing overwhelming odds. The final fight is a mess whose main problem is that you have the awesome team up before the final showdown, meaning everyone gathers their strength and beats the crap out of his mecha hand, but he has to win anyway because he needs his showdown with Robert, kidnapping a dog out of nowhere to justify our hero surrendering to get to the brink of despair again, which makes the whole battle feel like padding. Just put the showdown and the lowest moment, the moment of despair, before the big fight. But it's not the worst and most anticlimactic showdown, and I will admit that choosing to finish him with either a move from Dragon Ball Z or Mortal Kombat was awesome. Well, that's all for today, thank you very much, see you next time ladies and gentlemen, and remember to like and subscribe.